I'm so excited about this opportunity to share the new version of the Practitioner's Report with you. And I'm also generally excited about this version because I will be using it myself. Like I mentioned before, my name is Paula Franceković and I am a GlycanAge specialist. So my role is to help the GlycanAge clients interpret their report, their results, and then help them achieve a healthier longevity with precise actionable steps. And I've been doing this for 2 years. In that time, I've served for about 800 clients and partners. So I have lots of practical experience. So hopefully I will be able to answer your practice-related questions. I will now start sharing my screen. And first, we will go through the new report. So it will look like this when you have it available. And after we finish going through the report, I will also show you 2 case examples. Those were my real clients, and see how I interpret the glycan indexes and the glycan overlaps, and see how they can be useful in practice. I hope that you will find and see relevance in this, and I hope that I will be able to transfer this practical knowledge to you. So we start with, and feel free to use the Q&A function. Other people from the team are here to answer, and I will also leave time at the end to answer all of your questions. Okay, so this is the first page of the report. It will have the name of your clinic and center here, and you have these encrypted data from your patient or client. These are the contents of the report. So what I really love is this executive summary, because we have all of the glycan insights at one place and all of the overlaps at one place. So you can just at a glance see right away and recognize a potential area to focus on further. These I find very, very useful. We then have the results breakdown. So we have each of the indexes, and they are presented in a much more intuitive way. Then we have the glycan insights part of the report. So this is where we show the overlaps. So we know that different diseases tend to show different glycan overlaps. So the glycan patterns change in a predictable pattern in these diseases and conditions. So you can see if your patient or client glycans is correlated with some of the diseases. I will talk more about this when I get to that part. And we have the newest part of the report. We have the influencing factors. So here we have a list of conditions or therapies that can impact the GlycanAge results in a positive or a negative way. We will briefly go through all of them, and you can start to see, and it's important for you to evaluate if these conditions or therapies are present in your patients for you to get an accurate reading and to know what are the main drivers of their changes in the glycans. Okay, just a brief introduction. I know that you are already quite familiar with what GlycanAge measures. So in this test, we are measuring inflammation. And you probably all know what inflammation is. So what can occur is that our immune system can drive changes that are related to low-grade chronic inflammation that accumulates over the years. So what basically occurs in the immune system, as we age, there is a shift in creating more pro-inflammatory glycans and less anti-inflammatory protective glycans. So this is kind of a natural occurrence that happens as we age. However, this can be accelerated or reversed with certain positive or negative influences from the environment. So I think I'll best use an example to kind of bring this home. So for example, let's imagine that we have a healthy 20-year-old and a healthy 60-year-old. So because of the aging process, what we would expect to see is a healthy 60-year-old having higher levels of pro-inflammatory glycans and generally lower levels of anti-inflammatory defenses. compared to the healthy 20-year-old. However, if that 20-year-old is exposed to a lot of exogenous inflammatory mediators, for example, if that person is a smoker, eats a lot of ultra-processed food, is leading a very sedentary life, that can cause a disturbance between the balance in the glycans. So their glycoprofile can shift towards a more pro-inflammatory side and resemble more of somebody that is 60 plus years old. And this is where we get the difference between the chronological and biological age that we evaluate in this test. And vice versa is also possible. So if a healthy 60-year-old implements and addresses all of the lifestyle factors, they can actually reactivate their anti-inflammatory defenses, reduce their pro-inflammatory load, and their immune system can resemble more of somebody that is chronologically much younger. And this is exactly what we want to be seeing. And we are sometimes seeing it. You will see one of the case examples that shows very positive changes upon implementing protective lifestyle interventions. Okay, so here we have the result summary, and I mentioned I find this very useful. So you have the overall biological age, and you have all of the indexes listed here, so you can at a glance see. And if you train your eye a little bit, you will be very quick to notice certain patterns emerging. Here in this example, we see negative elevations in the glycan lifestyle. So right away, this should activate you to evaluate, are there any negative habits that could be causing this steep increase? So this is something that we would typically see in smokers or heavy alcohol drinkers, or sometimes it arises from other environmental factors. I will move on, and I will talk a little bit about each of these indexes later on. We also have a summary of the overlaps. So as you may know, these are the newest addition to our practitioner's report. So what we know from many years of research so far is that particular diseases, these diseases listed here, and many others, tend to show a distinct glycan pattern. And we can overlap the results of your patient or a client with the typical patterns in glycans that we see in these diseases and conditions. So you can see, so there are 3 levels of overlaps. Somebody can have significant overlap, minor overlap, or no significant overlap. What I generally see is that minor overlaps are, in most of the cases, a consequence. And in most of the cases, they are not actionable enough to form further investigations. However, significant overlaps should be considered when creating further actionable steps. You will see it in a really nice way in the case examples. Okay, so this is also a summary just to remind you that glycans regulate pro and anti-inflammatory functions of the immune system. So I mentioned this before. So what is important is for us to have a balance between the pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory functions, and glycans are responsible for this. So glycans are complex sugars that our body creates, and they get put on top of our immune system molecules. If they are created in a pro-inflammatory way, what they would do is activate all of the pro-inflammatory cascade and activate inflammation in the body. If they are created in an anti-inflammatory way, they would activate the opposite metabolic pathway, so they would activate anti-inflammatory pathways. So generally what we want to have is low levels of the pro-inflammatory glycans and high levels of the anti-inflammatory glycans in a healthy state. There are certain states or certain periods where we would want to have higher levels of pro-inflammatory glycans, and that is, for example, in cases where we have an infection, or when the body is trying to fight off cancer, or after chemotherapy. So these are kind of change states, but we want to make them as pass as quick as possible and kind of regenerate the anti-inflammatory pathways in the body. Okay, Am I rushing? I don't know. I tend to talk very quickly, so I'll stop myself for a second. Okay, so let me talk about the overall biological age. So this is the first metric that we have, in our new practitioner report. This is a very important metric because it gives you an overall idea about this balance between pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory pathways in the body. So what we want to see is somebody that is below their chronological age, which indicates generally lower levels of the pro-inflammatory glycans and higher levels of the protective anti-inflammatory glycans. Typically, majority of our clients fall into a category of plus or minus 9 years from their chronological age. 58% of our clients are in this category, and we consider this fully manageable, fully addressable by primarily lifestyle alterations. When we see a difference that is higher than 9 years, this is a sign of a steeper pro-inflammatory shift. And this is typically seen in people who are, for example, newly diagnosed with chronic disease, or there are some indications that there are negative influences of the inflammatory mediators from their diet, environment, and so on. So further investigation is definitely needed. In the category, and this is a nice page that summarizes all of this. So if somebody has a overall lower biological age, these are kind of the main 4 drivers that are potentially driving this reduction. So of course, somebody that has an optimized lifestyle, takes good care of their diet, sleep, exercise routine, and stress management would have an overall lower biological age. We also see positive effects of certain therapies, and most commonly in practice, we see positive effects of hormone replacement therapies in women that are entering the perimenopause and menopausal periods. But also in men, we see it with testosterone replacement therapy if this is needed. One of the reasons why we see such benefits is because estradiol is the main activator of the creation of the anti-inflammatory glycan profile. So it is truly a rejuvenating therapy in a way, if you think about it. Even though perimenopause and menopause are totally natural processes, they come with a certain pro-inflammatory shift that can accelerate the aging process. We also know that people who suffer from certain inflammatory conditions, for example, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, or for example, psoriasis, when they integrate a biologics therapy, they tend to overall reduce the pro-inflammatory load, and also their symptoms reduce if the therapy is right for them. We also know that there are certain parts of a certain part of the population that has this genetic advantage. So some of them have centenarian genes, and some of them have good glycan creating genes. And we know that 40% of the glycom is hereditary. So some of us are just given this genetical edge to have an overall lower biological age. There are also other factors. I will talk about them a little bit later. And of course, for the higher biological age, we know that unoptimized lifestyle is driving an increase of the biological age. And we also know that existence of certain chronic conditions and certain periods in life that we are kind of more prone to creating the pro-inflammatory side of glycans also result in a higher biological age. I will talk about this when I talk about the overlaps. So here is a very exciting page of the new report, which shows you the changes in the biological age over time, which is exceptionally beneficial for you working in practice. So for those who have preventative protocols that they can implement. So for example, here we see a 28-year-old client that has a biological age of 46. So what you can expect, for example, if you implement proper protocols and if you address the areas of concern, we would see how biological age changes over time, and if it goes back to baseline or even higher, which is something interesting because it gives you an opportunity to evaluate your protocols and see if they are working for this particular client. But what you can also do is increase the adherence, because we know that a lot of the clients fall off the protocol in a few months, 3 to 6 months, a year or so. And if they remeasure again and the biological age is increased again, you can use it as a communication point and see what can increase their adherence, and kind of use it as a marker that they should get back on track. Now we have the part where we have a depiction of each individual glycan index. So here, the first one is Glycan Shield, and there are a total of 5 glycan indexes. Glycan Shield is an anti-inflammatory index, so it's made of glycans that activate the anti-inflammatory mechanisms in the body. So what we want to do is have a high quantity of these glycans because they are protective. So here now the results are presented as a graph, and they are compared to the population average, which I really love. So here we have the population average, and you can see that these results are higher than the average at this chronological age. And we see the percentile here, so 72nd percentile. So everything above the 50th percentile I would deem as beneficial, but we always want to go from lighter green to darker green if we can. What we also know is, and what we try to depict here to help you, is the areas to look into and suggestions how to optimize this index. This can be a little bit confusing, but what we wanted to say with this, what to look into, is if Glycan Shield is low and should be elevated. So for example, if you see a sentence here, check your patient's diet, exclusion diets such as vegan, carnivore, keto, and so on. This doesn't mean that those diets would be beneficial, but it would actually mean the opposite. So if a certain elimination, very restrictive diet is present, it could deplete the body of needed nutrients, and it could cause a lowering of the Glycan Shield glycans. Hopefully this will be understandable to you. What I know from practical experience is that people that are in this better category tend to describe themselves as very resilient to, for example, seasonal colds or infections. They do not get sick very often, and if they do, the symptoms are generally mild. So most of the people that are here would describe themselves as not being sick from a seasonal cold for, I don't know, 3 to 5 years before the testing, which is an indication of a strong immune defense. And we see people that are in this worst category tend to be more fragile to environmental impacts, and most of them are lacking certain nutrients. So focus must be put here on proper supplementation and increasing the nutrient density of the diet. There are also other factors, but I don't have enough time to go into all of the details. I will move on to Glycan Youth. So this is another beneficial anti-inflammatory index made of glycans that have 2 galactoses on top. So they are, when they have these 2 galactoses, they are created in a beneficial way, and they would activate anti-inflammatory metabolic pathways. Here we also have the same depiction, so population average and your client or patient results. Here we see that the results are closer to the average. What we know from the research so far is that hormones, particularly sex hormones, are a major driver of a good balance in this index. So for example, if somebody has low results, we should evaluate sex hormone panels, but also certain metabolic conditions. I think you will find that the case example that I prepared for you is particularly useful in order to see is the hormone balance something that we should focus on, or is the metabolic side of things something that we should focus on when we have a reduction of Glycan Youth. It takes a bit of a learning time for you to be able to recognize what the primary driver is, but when you do, it gets really, really easy. We also know that some autoimmune conditions tend to decrease the level of glycan youth indexes, and this also needs to be kind of triangulated with a family history or a personal history of the client. On the other side of things, we have the glycan mature. So this is a set of pro-inflammatory glycans, and for this index, we want to have as lower score as possible. Here we see a beneficial result. So this index, so the side of pro-inflammatory glycans, is also driven by hormonal balance, but it can also be increased by, for example, a disruption of thyroid hormones or an overall baseline increase of cortisol, which is commonly seen in, for example, perimenopause and menopause periods. And one of the reasons why we see typically elevations of this index in those periods. We know that hormone replacement therapies also improve this particular index. But what we also know is, for example, if somebody has a high exogenous inflammatory load, for example, a person that is drinking lots of alcohol and eating a lot of ultra-processed foods, we tend to see an increase of these pro-inflammatory glycans, which I would say is very intuitive to think about. And if this pro-inflammatory load is reduced, we see a reduction of those pro-inflammatory glycans. After that, we come to glycan median. So this is a very interesting supportive glycan index. I say supportive because oftentimes we need to combine the results with other ones to form specific patterns. You will see it in the case example. What we know is that this is a specific glycan because we want to have it around the 50th percentile, and this shows good glycom stability in general. Having very low quantity in this index is indicative of high risk of developing cardiovascular diseases in most of the cases, and very high levels are typically seen in neurodegenerative diseases. So we want to kind of be in the middle. I mentioned, so this is part of the glycom that is mostly driven by our genetical side of the glycom. So if somebody has a family history of cardiovascular diseases in a combination of a very low score here in the glycan median, that's a sign that further evaluation of the cardiovascular risk profile is needed. Lastly, we have the glycan lifestyle index. So this is on the opposite side, an index that is driven most by our daily habits. And very interesting thing about this index is we actually do not expect for it to be higher as we chronologically age. And this is why it's not contributing to the overall calculation of the biological age. And this is also why somebody could still have an overall lower biological age and higher results in the glycan lifestyle. So it should be evaluated separately from the overall biological age. What we know are the main drivers of a negative increase in these glycans is whether a client is a smoker, heavier alcohol drinker, or if a client is exposed to high amounts of stress with poor sleep quality, and also some environmental factors. So for example, if a client is exposed to poor air quality or toxins or heavy metals in the diet, this kind of environmental factors needs to be investigated further. Okay, now that we talked about the glycan indexes, I will now start describing the glycan overlaps. So this is the newest edition of the report. We know that specific diseases have their own glycan fingerprints, like I mentioned before, so we can overlap the results of your clients with the diseases, with a typical representation of the glycan patterns seen in these diseases and conditions to see if there are significant minor overlaps or not significant overlaps. So here in the new report, you have details about each of the conditions that is measured. So for example, for hypertension, we know that a specific pattern that occurs in people who are at a high risk of developing hypertension is at the same time lower glycan youth, higher glycan mature, and lower glycan median. So if that is present, more focus should be put on introducing preventative efforts to stop hypertension and to increase the overall cardiovascular health. And I'm not going to go into too much details because this has to be interpreted in a very specific case-by-case way. And you also have the support from our specialist to help you with initial interpretation and kind of educate you on each individual client's case. What I would like to particularly mention is the perimenopause. It's listed as one of the diseases which can be confusing for most of you. It's a natural part of life. However, we know that perimenopause comes with a distinct pro-inflammatory changes in the glycans, which should be addressed therapeutically. So what we know happens in perimenopause is at the same time we have reduction of the glycan shield and youth and increase in the glycan mature and lifestyle. So overall, the glycoprofile shifts towards a pro-inflammatory state. And this can increase the risk of many chronic diseases and conditions. We know that many women after the perimenopause and menopause develop cardiovascular diseases, develop hypertension, develop osteoporosis, partially due to the pro-inflammatory shifts in the glycans because they are depleted of anti-inflammatory protection and they have a higher pro-inflammatory load. So this should be addressed, and the best way to do this is a combination of hormone replacement therapy and lifestyle optimizations. Okay, now we came to the influencing factors part of the report. I really like this one, and I think it's going to be even more fulfilled in the future. But this is a sum up of certain drivers that either cause beneficial changes or not so beneficial changes in parts of the glycome. So for example, with pregnancy, what we would expect to see is an overall reduction of the biological age and increase of the anti-inflammatory side of glycan. So very positive changes with pregnancy. Unfortunately, post-pregnancy, we see quite the opposite. So we see reduction of the anti-inflammatory protection and an overall increase of the age in that period. And this should be supported with proper preventative therapies and efforts to boost again the anti-inflammatory capacity of the immune system. We also know that irregular cycles often come with an overall higher biological age. So in practice, I oftentimes see all of the indexes are kind of around the 50th percentile. However, biological age is 10 years higher than the chronological age. And these are typically seen in women with PCOS and underlying insulin resistance. So this can be also addressed with targeted therapies and protocols. I mentioned perimenopause before, and we have now kind of the sum up of all of the changes that occur in this period. We know that with hormone replacement therapy, the overall biological age goes down and the overall pro-inflammatory load decreases. But in practical experience, I can tell you that glycan youth also increases, and in certain cases, even glycan shield increases. And we see a kind of a systematic positive change in the glycome, which is oftentimes seen in women who combine hormone replacement therapy with proper care of their lifestyle. So they start to exercise in a more beneficial way. They start to take care about their nutrient density a little bit more. And all of these positive changes kind of combine to form a more beneficial picture. With supplements, interestingly, we are yet to determine the effect of those supplements. We now have just a few studies showing the positive effects of omega-3 supplementation and mild positive effects of the NAD+ supplementation. So we did one study with nuchidotime, and we seen an overall reduction of the biological age by 1.26 years. And here there is lots of room for further investigation. Unfortunately, from our side, a lot of our clients have personalized supplement therapy. So it's very hard for us to gather the data about which supplements work and which are the major drivers of positive change and which are not contributing that much to the beneficial changes that we are seeing. But hopefully in your practice, you can test your own supplement blends and see what works best for your clients. With weight loss, we also see systematic positive changes. So overall reduction of the biological age, increase in the anti-inflammatory glycans, and decrease in the pro-inflammatory load. So very systematic beneficial change with weight loss. I think you will find this interesting. So we did a study where we had groups of people that are taking metformin, that are taking testosterone replacement therapy, that are taking a combination of two, and fourth group that is placebo. So what we notice is a beneficial improvement in these two categories. So people who were taking testosterone replacement therapy or a combination. We didn't see improvements in healthy people that took metformin, which is a very interesting finding because metformin was put as one of the longevity drug candidates. But what we know is that it can work in a beneficial way in people who are prone to develop type 2 diabetes or have insulin resistance or poor glucose control. However, no such positive benefits were seen in healthy people who took metformin. Over-exercising can increase the biological age. And this is something that I see more commonly than I expected to see. What I also see in practice is with over-exercising, I also see a reduction in the glycan youth and increase in the glycan mature. So reduction of the anti-inflammatory protective glycans and increase in the pro-inflammatory load. We tend to have a lot of clients that are biohackers, that are very active about optimizing their health. Some of them work out once per day or more than once per day. When this is the case, and majority of them are also entrepreneurial, proactive, type A personalities that combine the exercise with a very overall active lifestyle, which often comes with poor sleep quality. So if those two things are combined, we see pro-inflammatory shifts. And it can be a very hard conversation to have because those people look very fit, they are generally active. So to have this conversation that they have an overall negative influences of inflammation occurring in their body can be difficult, but also very useful to have the arguments, to have the measurements, to kind of make them realize that they should slow down a little bit. And I typically communicate it in a way to set up a kind of an experimental period. If they reduce the exercise load, if they focus on getting more recovery and getting better sleep quality for 3 months, we can measure the GlycanAge again and see if the parameters are improving. In most of the cases, they are. So the trust is increased in those situations. Stress generally increases the overall biological age. It can also increase the glycan lifestyle and cause other specific changes, but this is from the study where only the biological age increase was observed. Insufficient sleep, like I mentioned, also generally increasing the biological age. And diet, unfortunately, we try to test the diet in many different ways, try different dietary patterns and protocols. What we found out is that certain dietary regimes work in a very beneficial way for one part of the study population, and they do quite the opposite or no effects at all in another study population. But generally what we found is that caloric restriction, however you achieve it, is generally beneficial and would cause positive changes in the whole glycome. And that is it. I will stop my sharing now and see your questions, and then I will move on to describing the case examples that I prepared. Okay, or maybe I will start with the case examples and then answer your questions a little bit later, because I will lose too much time if I do it now. I want to make sure that we are in an hour. So I will use another 10 minutes to describe these two case studies. So these are real clients, and we have the first one. So as you can see here at a glance, I really love this way of representing the glycan indexes right away, even without evaluating the further glycan details about the client. You can see decreases in the glycan youth, increases in the glycan mature, which indicates either a hormonal or a metabolic disturbance. We also see quite a negative pattern, so reduction of the glycan median, increase of the glycan lifestyle. And even though we see each of these individual results commonly, it's not very common to see at the same time a slight reduction of the glycan median and slight increase of the glycan lifestyle. So that's an important pattern to look for. So let's talk about the patient profile. So this is a 51-year-old female, business professional, not a smoker, rarely consumes alcohol, gets 6 to 7 hours of poor quality sleep. So right away we can start to connect the patterns between, for example, elevated glycan lifestyle perhaps. Then we see that this client rarely or never engages in physical activity, has a high intake of ultra-processed foods, although prioritizes protein and has an average vegetable intake, has a BMI of 37.5. So the client is put in the obese category and reports moderate amount of daily stress. The client is currently taking a medication to prevent asthma attacks. Family history, unfortunately, is not reported, and personal history is obesity, allergies, and asthma. The client did not report taking any supplements. So upon further discovery, what was interesting to me is to hear that the severity and frequency of allergies recently increased. And this medication is a new addition to the medication routine for that client. Also very interesting, and I would say very common, the client does not consider themselves as obese or unhealthy, and that's very common. Even though they are classified in this category, oftentimes they would say, well, I am overweight, but that doesn't matter, or something like that. And this is very important because we know that with these glycan insights, a notion of a healthy obese slowly fades away, because we do see pro-inflammatory changes that occur with obesity that are associated with changed metabolic profile, and they can increase the risk of certain diseases. You will see it in the next slide. The client also reports feeling older and generally low energy. However, interestingly, the blood work parameters do not show any areas of concern, so the client was thinking that they are overall doing okay. And we can use the glycan insights as talking points and as conversation points to talk to the client and make them more aware of the potential dangers that they have in their lifestyle and potential areas that they can improve on. And we have the glycan overlaps to help us do this. So as you can see here, we have 3 overlaps in the hypertension area. So we have increased risk of hypertension, increased risk of hypertension, pre-hypertension, and increased risk of hypertension. So typically they go in line. So for example, if this client tested 10 years ago, we would potentially see just an overlap here in the increased risk of hypertension. Over the years, this translates into all 3 areas. We also see a significant overlap in the COPD, so pulmonary disease. And we also see minor overlaps across the board. Like I mentioned, so these minor overlaps would not be significant enough for me to form, for example, detailed test about rheumatoid arthritis or ulcerative colitis. I would focus on significant overlapped areas and then measure the GlycanAge again and see if the minorly overlapped areas disappear. In most cases, they do. So let's see what are the what are the focus areas. And I also, here in this page, separated the specific patterns that are typically seen in hypertension and in COPD. So interestingly, somebody that doesn't have lung problems, asthma, allergies can only have the overlaps in this situation, can only have the overlaps for example, hypertension. But in this case, we see two distinct patterns emerging. So let's go over the recommendations. So addressing obesity and raising awareness about the pro-inflammatory changes that may elevate the risk for cardiovascular diseases is an extremely important point. And we know that because of the shifts that the pro-inflammatory shifts that occur with obesity, we see increased creation of the pro-inflammatory mediators, which then can increase the risk of hypertension. So that's a very important point to communicate with the client. Also, what we know is that, for example, reducing the pro-inflammatory load of ultra-processed foods will result in glycan mature reduction, and the increased introduction of daily walks will result in glycan median increase, which is beneficial. And we know that glycan median lower levels are associated with poor cardiovascular health. And we know that ultra-processed foods is high, so this is probably the main driver of the pro-inflammatory shifts. We know that introducing more nutritious foods and targeted supplements can result in glycan yield improvements. And from the newest Glycan insights, we know that the overall weight reduction will cause positive systematic changes. So at the same time, we would have increases in the glycan yield, decreases in the glycan mature, and increases in the glycan median. This is to address the hypertension overlap. Further recommendations to address the COPD overlap is to investigate sex hormone levels and adjust the therapies accordingly and evaluate the microbiome health. And this is particularly important because we know that the allergies are more severe and more frequent in the last year than they were before. This is a very kind of new finding, suggests that with the decreases in the estradiol that occur in perimenopause periods, a client can be more susceptible to developing allergies and more susceptible to generally producing more, how do you call it, histamine, which activates the allergy response in the body. I also would suggest spirometry and further lung health evaluation because we know that the client is suffering symptoms and it's also taking the medication, which is not addressing the overall inflammatory load created by occurrence of asthma and allergies. So further investigation is needed in the respiratory health department. Okay, this is a case example study 2. This is a positive, extremely positive case, which I'm very excited to present. So we have a 71-year-old male, a retired vice president in the automotive industry, not a smoker, rarely consumes alcohol, regularly gets a high quality sleep, leads an overall active lifestyle. And what is very interesting about this client is extensive dietary knowledge, which is focused on implementing longevity nutrition, and the overall diet plan is constantly evolving based on new nutrition research. The BMI is lower normal range and stress is medium to high, attributed to the health conditions of significant other. The client is not currently taking any medication, but has a family history of cardiovascular diseases, hypertension, osteoporosis, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. All of these are inflammation driven. So controlling the inflammatory processes and increasing the anti-inflammatory side of things, decreasing the pro-inflammatory glycans is extremely important in this client's case. With the supplements, you can see that this is a very thought out supplement routine. So not only does the client know the reasoning behind each of the supplements The client is also on top of the latest research. For example, it's taking omega-3 from algae, which by current evidence is the most observable point. Sorry, I'm messing up the Croatian and English words. The most usable form of DHA and EPA. This is what I wanted to say. The client is also taking ubiquinol rather than ubiquinone, a common mistake that I see. So he gets more of his CoQ10 supplements. For example, client is also taking urolithin A to activate the butyrate, creating part of the microbiome, which there are some good findings on this supplement recently released. And let's talk about the overlaps. So before I move further, additional information reveals that the client had a historically lower lung capacity. So he did annual checkups throughout his career, and the lung capacity was generally on the lower side. And client also reported being exposed to exhaust fumes because of his job, and also farmer's dust because he grew up in a farm. And with the overlaps, we see no significant overlaps across the board and minor overlap with the COPD department, primarily driven by slight reduction of the glycan median, which shows that we should focus on cardio side of the cardiorespiratory function. So I just briefly commented on the positive side of the glycoprofile in this client, and we agreed that we could work on improving the cardiorespiratory capacity with some biohacking efforts. The client agreed that he's going to try this inspiratory muscle training, increase the daily aerobic activity to further boost the aerobic capacity, and introduce daily breathing exercises. And we are waiting any moment to retest again and see if the glycan median improved. Okay, I will now stop my sharing and focus on your questions. Okay, it will take me some time to go through it. Participants will receive the recording. Yes, so the question, Stefan, your question was about the effects of testosterone therapy in men on the GlycanAge result. So what we know so far is that testosterone replacement therapy, when introduced, when needed, particularly in men that are after the age of chronological age of 50, with overall lower testosterone, they tend to work beneficially in overall reducing the biological age. And what they can also do is increase glycan youth and decrease glycan mature. So increase the anti-inflammatory glycans, decrease the pro-inflammatory glycans. But very interestingly, if the aromatase activity is inhibited, so if the conversion from testosterone to estradiol is not allowed, we do not see the beneficial effect. So we believe that it's this slight quantity of estrogen in men that is created from testosterone that is the driver of the positive changes in the glycon. The link will be shared to the link where you can access the sample report will be shared by the team. Yes, I see that the testosterone question was already answered. Okay, the details about the shelf life, somebody from the technical side of the team will answer those questions. Okay, we have Trish asking, can a chronic or acute injury, soft tissue shoulder injury, or bone break impact GlycanAge result? We see in certain cases, yes, if this becomes chronic, then we see pro-inflammatory changes. However, if this is acute and addressed in a shorter time period than 21 days, we do not see typically drastic changes in the glycom. So it typically takes 21 days or more for the glycans to start being created in a different way, because this is controlled by a huge enzymatic machinery. So different information, it takes a little bit more time for the whole process to start being created in a different way. Okay, testosterone question again. I already answered that. Okay, I see most of the questions were already answered by my colleagues, and I don't want to take anyone's time. So what we will do is I will go through all of the questions and reach out to you individually to see if there is a certain question that is left unanswered. And hopefully try to answer it to you and give you all of the details that you need. Please also feel free to reach out if you think about further questions that you want to ask. And thank you all for your attention. I'm quite excited about this new report, and hopefully I transferred the excitement to you and you will see the benefits. Okay, thank you so much, everybody.